Ugh, okay. It's clipping time again, folks. This time it's a threesome.
Hey guys, it's Lizzie's.
Hey guys, it's me, Seren.
Hi.
Foursome, I suppose. It's gonna make for some interesting flavours. We're gonna have you for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, ladies. And the ginger one looks like a female Victor Zen, so you will be eaten first.
I am a young, thin, English-speaking, cisgender white lady in reasonably good health.
You're this, and instead just viewing every single person as a unique individual.
All white people are racist.
I'll try and actually interject this time and punctuate it as best I can. It was rather lazy of me to leave you in the lurch last time. And then, in any case, as diverse as this CNET is, it's going to need a male lead. No one likes a sausage fest, but who doesn't love a sausage?
If you think that women should be treated the same as men in being allowed to run for office.
They are.
Women occupy 19.3% of the House seats, and 3 of the 9 Supreme Court justices are women.
And vote.
They can.
Right now, women can vote in every country except for Saudi Arabia and Vatican City.
In getting paid the same amount for the same job.
You are. Whether you are male or female, you get paid exactly as much money as you make.
We make 78 cents to every dollar that men make.
Yes. So if you think women should have to make just as much effort as men if they want the same payment, then you're not a feminist.
You can want things to be better for women, but not equal, and you are a feminist.
Atta girl.
And I maybe need to stop and take a step back and unlearn all these things.
Or, at the very least, an ally of feminism.
They cannot be your friends, they cannot be your allies, they cannot hang out with you, they cannot date you.
Then you're a feminist.
You're all slightly confused now, aren't you? Good, that means the medicine's working, and the blockage is dislodging.
Faces like mine, basically, are the ones that people most often see. Think of it like invisible advantages.
Those invisible advantages that you most often see.
Hey, can you admit that our society is racist?
Intersectional feminism is the idea that oppression does not exist in a binary yes-no state.
That sounds like a floundering to me, Seren.
If they can't do that, they gotta get the fuck out. They gotta go.
She's got you on the ropes, Jill! Fight the power!
A person can have attributes which both disadvantage them in society and ones which confer on them privilege.
Yes, all white people.
Black women are not the same as cultural and structural barriers holding back white women. I mean,
Stop viewing people based upon their gender and like putting them in a box and being like, because you're a woman or because you're a man.
You're not gonna break up this fight, Lizzie. Because all you're doing is swinging the same mace. It's Morning Star Swing Ball. The ultimate victim fight. Everyone's a loser. There's bits of skull all over the garden.
Convincing white people that racism exists is not your job.
We grow up having these preconceived notions about the world and about gender roles that aren't true.
Arguing with white people all day on the internet about shit that you know is true is not your job. That is the job of other white people. That is the job of these white allies.
Yes. You should leave the diplomacy and the politics and the white-collar jobs to the white people. Black people aren't suited to that kind of thing. Is that what you're saying?
And then they think that that's not even an option for them or something that they want to aspire to. And so what feminism does is it kind of comes in and it messes up that cycle.
they intersect.
It would be simply wonderful if any of you were twigging on by now. But if you haven't, I would advise you to consider the concept of a self-fulfilling prophecy. When you erroneously tell people they have no agency, you diminish their sense of agency. You stifle your own people, and you blame that stifling on the people who don't look like you. No one calls you out on it, so it keeps getting worse. You're only ever able to report the news accurately when you make the news. Which is quite often. The relationship between feminism and the press, between social justice and the press, is and always has been one gigantic conflict of interests. The blowing the whistle on your bullshit has been more than anyone's job's worth. Yeah, I'll give you a sort of lateral example.
The day that white people decide they want racism to be over, racism will be over.
See, I mean, there's racism in Zimbabwe, there's racism in Pakistan, there's racism in Thailand, and there's racism in Brazil. And none of it is ever going to stop until white people go over there and sort it all out. Well, we'll get right on it, my dear, but at the moment we're busy putting a stop to the racism in Syria.
Okay?
I can't... Are you gonna do the... Stop me when I do it right.
It is your job to create, again, a sense of agency and liberation in the Black community so that we can be self-sustaining.
You have any idea how much obvious wrong you just said? It is someone else's job to give you agency. It's up to white people to decide how and when black people should be sustained. Because then black people will be deciding for themselves. Lurpy, herpy, derpy. All you're doing is denying your own agency. And finding pseudo-intellectual excuses for being unambitious. A bit like this.
I don't think it's that women don't want to run for office. I think it's just that we're taught growing up that that's not really what women do.
Yeah, see, if women don't proportionally occupy positions of high risk, high stress, high public ridicule, and high public accountability, then it cannot possibly be because women choose not to do those incredibly shitty and thankless jobs. But when men become disproportionately unemployed, homeless, and suicidal, it must be because they chose to be that way. Fuck them. That's what you get for trying to be macho or whatever. Oh, I'm such a big man, I have to take responsibility for everything. Meh. Yeah, think of what the opposite of that is. It'd be, oh, I'm such a small woman, I'm not responsible for anything. Yeah, if men mock women for shitty behaviour, that's sexist. But when women mock men for decent, responsible behaviour, there's nothing sexist about that. Anyway, I'm going for a piss. You two go at it. I'll be back in a minute.
If you are, say, a person from a different culture and you are told that your culture is intrinsically just awful,
All white people are racist.
and you should shun all of it
Yes, all white people.
because then you will be a better feminist, or that your religion is intrinsically bad and oppressive to women and that you should shun that too. I've heard it called the kyriarchy.
But that is an embodiment of your privilege. So how about you step the fuck back and shut up?
It's quite understandable to be leery of a group which tells you that they are there to help you achieve equality and then treats you, a member of an already disadvantaged group, like poop.
So spare me your whining about not all white people, because I don't even fucking care. Like, I don't want to hear it. Like, yes, all white people.
The only solution I can see to this is that those of us who do not mind being called feminists will just have to work harder to make the term something that you can be proud of.
Or you could make your beliefs something to be proud of. Instead of discarding any convictions that don't align with your label, maybe try discarding any labels that don't align with your convictions.
People are more afraid of being called a racist than actually working on a racist system, right?
Right. Is that a touch of self-awareness I see fruiting in your conscience?
You have people that are so terrified of being called racist that they don't want to examine the fact that they are actually a motherfucking racist, right?
Please don't do this. I'm running out of original ways to head desk.
And it's funny, like, how we understand this when we're talking about other forms of pathology, right? Like, we understand... My hair is, like, really annoying me. Sorry, guys. Like...
Days never finish. Messing up me working. Some of us set me free.
Of course, on the other side of the I don't call myself a feminist spectrum is the person who will tell you that they don't call themselves a feminist because they believe in equal rights and feminism has gone too far. Of course, as far as I know, we haven't actually achieved equality yet, so it's difficult to go too far when you have not yet gone far enough to reach your stated goal.
As Lizzie demonstrated earlier, Jill, 3 examples of feminism's goals are equal voting rights for women, government representation by women, and equal pay for equal work. All of these were comprehensively achieved and written in stone generations ago and have not been challenged ever since. But like most feminists, you are pathologically incapable of rejoicing in your privilege, or even so much as recognizing it, let alone recognizing that it is men you have to thank for affording you a more privileged life than a saber-toothed tiger.
I think the worst things happen when we don't see things from the other person's point of view, or when we don't listen to what people tell us that they need.
You are one of the feminists you just described. And you are one of the reasons people don't call themselves feminists. Because that is the difference between a women's rights advocate and a feminist. Women's rights advocates achieve human rights for women. And then feminists come along and pretend it hasn't happened. Men's rights advocates try to achieve human rights for men. And then feminists come along and prevent it from happening.
But what about the men?
I'm glad you asked, Jill. Here are 3 examples of human rights still uniquely unextended to men. The equal right to parental surrender, the equal right to parental custody, and the equal right to genital integrity. By the logic you just outlined, Jill, until these rights are brought to an equal standard, you must call yourself a men's rights advocate if you believe in equality of the genders, like feminists are supposed to. You must, by your own logic, use your identity to advocate for these rights, regardless of the presence or absence of any human rights you can think of that are uniquely unextended to women. And if all you can come up with is some fetishistic projections about catcalling and manspreading and objectification, then you will do yourself no favours.
Street harassment. I hope that was a reasonably thorough set of answers to the questions posed.
That was the closest you came in the whole video to even mentioning an example of a women's issue. And that was an extraordinary amount of honey jack I just poured into my face. But, 2 of the first men's issues you could think of, off the top of your head, were these.
Men in America's disproportionate incarceration, or the difficulty that fathers have getting custody rights of their children.
The information I just clipped out, in order to make that excerpt, Jill, revealed the telltale signs of your unapologetic sexism and racism. But thank you for managing to say the relevant words in a single clip. Men of all races, all over the world, are disproportionately prevented from being parents and from being free citizens. Prevented by the clear and present anti-male bias in our judicial system. These, if you ask me, are excellent reasons to be an advocate of men's rights. And street harassment is not a particularly inspiring reason to join a cult that quite vehemently advocates against men's human rights. If your argument for using labels is that labels are sometimes applicable, then you sure as shit had better use labels that are actually applicable in the real world of human rights. Not what people wear, not how people speak to each other, not how you feel, and not how other people make you feel. I'm talking about legally sanctioned human rights that the government takes away from men, whether men like it or not. Yes, Jill, there are women in the government who don't want other women having abortions. And that doesn't mean it's all women's fault. Let that sink in. Well, Jill, there are men in the government who don't want other men having all kinds of things. Like the right to be a father, custodially. The right not to be a father, financially. The right to a complete skin, genitally. And that doesn't mean it's all men's fault. But the clincher for me, Jill, is even though the women and men who want to strip women of their rights are quite justly and regularly told to fuck off, the women and men who want to strip men of their rights are generally patted on the back for being beacons of compassion and progressivism. Even if they're not helping women whatsoever. If all they're doing is fucking things up for men and men only, then they'll probably get a Nobel Prize just for what they did to the statistics. See, I do not just blame women, and I do not just blame men for these things. I do not just blame feminism for these things. I do not even just blame gynocentrism for these things. I just advocate for the attention of everyone's human rights, including men. And I don't deny that the verb for that has a corresponding noun to which my identity is thereby subject. But alas, Jill, feminists like you exist. There are no card-carrying patriarchists, and there are no card-carrying gynocentrists. But there are plenty of card-carrying feminists. An empire's worth. And where you card-carrying feminists are very good at magically ignoring all the advances in women's rights, you're also very good at magically ignoring the continuing diminishment of men's rights.
But what about the men?
Again, your compassion astounds me, Jill.
Does being a feminist also mean caring about the issues of men?
You know, I tried to get you to argue with one of the other two girls, but hilariously enough, Jill, my search for a point of view that flat out contradicts your own led me to a very bewildered young lady named Jill. I've taken the voice of your conscience and given it a flip and a time stretch, leaving you and your normal voice to tell us how you really feel. Get ready, Jill. You're about to perform the funniest 2.5 minutes of social commentary in which you'll ever be involved.
Just because I am not, say, a queer Mexican woman does not mean that I think that the issues which are specific to queer Mexican women are unimportant. It does mean that I probably shouldn't try to speak for queer Mexican women.
But if you are dealing with men's issues, for example, and for men's substitute any kind of issue, the question, but what about the men, tends to be a question asked less by oppressed minorities and more by a specific type of person who can't bear that someone somewhere is talking about something other than him.
If they say, here are our problems and here are ways that you can help.
Like the whole macho man never show your feelings leads to mental health problems BS.
Then, you know, that it is incumbent upon me to try and do that.
Your specific problems are not problems which I personally experience, and so they are unimportant.
It is possible to care about both of those things and believe that both of them are important and both of them need addressing. This is not an either-or situation.
Nobody has time to engage themselves in every problem which the world has. I have to prioritize somewhere. Street harassment.
Equality means that we're trying to get all people to the same place of rights and opportunities.
There are bigger issues, and you are being selfish to focus on things which only affect you specifically.
But we're all starting in different places, so naturally we're gonna take different routes to get there.
Caring about men's issues does not mean letting them take over the entirety of the conversations.
Well, see, now we're back to the war battle metaphor.
That does not give you the right to go barging into a space where they are talking about some other kind of issue and say, stop talking about that.
And in America's disproportionate incarceration, or the difficulty that fathers have getting custody rights of their children.
You must talk about this now. Street harassment. topic under discussion had nothing to do with you. I cannot possibly, help with all of them at once. There aren't enough hours in the day, even if I didn't eat or sleep.
If you are, say, a person from a different culture and you are told that your culture is intrinsically just awful and demanding to know why they are not talking about your problems.
And I have been answering this question like you are asking it in good faith.
In what, Jill?
In good faith, which, I hope you are, or at least I hope someone somewhere is.
I don't quite know what you mean by that, Jill. Good faith. It's the kind of language I only hear made by religious zealots and the IRA. Just because you sound like a pig doesn't mean you're Aaron.
The reason I think you're asking the question in good faith as opposed to other people who aren't is because you are asking me a question in my ask box and not barging into a discussion.
By barging into a discussion, do you mean leaving a comment in the comment section? And is that exactly what you also mean by your pidgin English phrase, asking me a question in my ask box? This is your version of logic, Jill. When you like the comment, when the comment lavishes you with compliments and confirmation bias, you call it an astute observation made in good faith. When you don't like the comment, when the comment exposes your selfish hypocrisy for what it is, you call it barging into the discussion. I find your tone very intimidating, and you're making me very angry. Jill, both of these things are exactly the same event, a comment on the internet. But lo and behold, a comment against men's rights and for women's rights is a happy flower of love that blossomed in your palace garden. But a comment in favour of men's rights is a rabid berserk minotaur smashing down the door of your dilapidated mud hut. Yes, Jill, I'm sure you do believe in equality, but you also believe you can transmogrify reality into whatever the hell you feel like. And that is only equality from inside your head, Jill. Out here in the real world, that is you being a selfish, oblivious bint. But on the subject of faith, Jill, what do you think the Bible has to say about this sort of thing? I'll give you a few seconds to think of what the Bible might typically say about gender. You're probably thinking of something like 1 Corinthians 7 verse 4. A wife does not have the right over her own body, but her husband does. Gah! You got me! God damn you, Jill! You're a crafty bugger, so you are! You're right, the Bible does say things like that. And the catharsis we're now having shows us a great deal about how our minds can work. Take it away, Lizzie, my darling.
The message that the Bible shows, and we should think of sex as something that makes us equal.
Are you noticing verse 5 there, Jill? Are you good at reading it now? Is it... When you're talking to feminists and you recite verse 4 and only verse 4, how many of them do you think will respond, and what does verse 5 say? And how many of them will instead say, thank you for picking this cherry. I like this cherry you picked. You are actually annoyed by verse 5, aren't you? You find it inconvenient. Think about that. The Bible has turned out to be more egalitarian than you thought. And that is an inconvenience to every fibre of your ideology. Because your ideology does not make it convenient for you to be seen as equal. It makes it convenient for you to be seen as a victim. Even if you're not. It gives incentive for you to be seen as a victim. You're not allowed to know the truth, or the trick doesn't work. The truth is, by falsely hyper-emphasizing your victimhood, you set in motion a series of misdirections which leaves other people more victimized than yourself. I think what I'm saying is largely filled in by that stuff I said earlier, Jill. And I'm going to move on to Lizzie now. See, while you simply asserted that women aren't equal, giving no examples except street harassment, women getting haphazardly complimented by unworthy men. I mean, fucking hell, Jill. You must know that losing your children and going to prison is worse than that. You just very clearly don't give a shit. Fucking wow, Jill. But yeah, Lizzie tried to list a bunch of things, but of course she listed a bunch of things that affect both women and men, sometimes worse for men, and she's going to pretend they happen only or principally to women. Just like you did with 1 Corinthians 7 there. I love it when a plan comes together. As for Serene, well, take a wild guess as to what she's still repeating over and over again.
Like the racist systems that are in place in this country.
Just precious. Anyway, carry on, Lizzie. Carry on, Lizzie. Yeah.
There's a movie that came out called American Hustle, and the movie company is Sony, and they accidentally had their economic tax records leaked out.
So you have one data cluster, one accidentally leaked data cluster. You have no reason to assume this is indicative of a pattern in a larger system.
And we found out that the female leads of the movie, Jennifer Lawrence and Amy Adams, were paid less than their male co-stars.
The same thing happens to male actors. Big shot actors are not paid wages to be regulated by the production company. They are paid salaries on a job-by-job basis to be negotiated in advance by a third party. Why does it not surprise me in the slightest that you have no idea what an agent is?
Just because they're female.
Wrong! They have bad agents. Perhaps due to bad advice. Or maybe they just have a diminished sense of agency. Thanks to bad advice from people like you.
This same company has 2 co-presidents of production, so it's the same exact job, and they have 1 female and 1 male working it. And the female, who's the co of this guy, makes $1 million less than him a year.
The same thing can happen to a man. If the man is the co of the woman.
Just because of her gender.
Wrong. See what I mean? How you're doing exactly what everyone else did with 1 Corinthians 7. You look at a problem that very blatantly affects both genders equally, and you magically pretend that it doesn't happen to men. And on the basis of that delusion, you demand that it never happens to women. You demand this by legal force. Is that when you see a man and a woman chained up together, you free the woman, you tie the chain to a tree, and then you fuck off. And you leave him there, chained to a tree, for generations, while you complain about women getting chained to trees by men. Are you going to mention female quotas at any point? Those actually are just because of gender.
Social equality. So this is the biggest one that I see talked about in the media and in the news. It's just the sense that women are viewed as being inferior to men.
And men are viewed as being inferior to women. Sorry, I mean, it's just the sense that men are viewed as being inferior to women. The sense I get from my preferred brand of news media. That's the equivalent of the reasoning you're using, Lizzie. The feminist media tells you you're a victim, so you need feminism because you feel like a victim. Round and round we go, Lizzie, day in, day out. And if this whirlwind of navel-gazing victimhood just happens to result in the actual, measurable, real-life, needless suffering of men, then meh, whatever. We have to keep this feminist death wheel spinning because women feel victimized by it.
And you might even think that you don't know anyone who even still believes that or who lives that out.
No, I do. I really do. That's what's so scary. I listen to a lot of feminists and feminist supporters. And it's not just people on the internet like you. People I know from actual real life will have deranged meltdowns over this. They will make complete hysterical assholes of themselves in public, saying hypocritical fallacy after hypocritical fallacy, rolling around in pointless semiotic manure like the psycho-AIDS pigs they are, insulting your family when you correct them. And yet they still go away thinking they hold the moral high ground. Now, I know plenty of people who still live in that dark age, witch-smelling mob mentality. Thank you very much. Now, Lizzie, I'm going to show these people a snapshot of the collage of words that you're about to display. They're looking for themes now, Lizzie. They're trying to find a common element. Are they all things that men say? Are they all things that women say? Do they affect only men? Do they affect only women? Is it all about sex negativity, or is it all about sex positivity? All of these things even negative connotations? No, Lizzie. This image does not cohere into a point about anything. These are just buzzwords that you have picked up, written down somewhere, and then piled higgledy-piggledy onto the screen to give the impression that you have learned a damn thing about gender ever. What you're doing here is exactly what Brianna Wu did in the opening of her speech at Inspirefest. You obviously don't have a clue how to empathize with others or reach out to people. You just think if you cram enough controversial-sounding words around the spectacle of your frail, decorated body, then people will feel bad for you and give you whatever you want. You are not interested in social change. You're just here to abuse a vacuous spirit of change, so you can damsel yourself into the easy life. And there's nothing remotely progressive about that. It's nature's most regressive and ancient force, with the possible exception of supermassive black holes.
Women are constantly objectified.
Men are constantly objectified too. Would you care to take this rebuttal yourself, Lizzie?
I understand that we all are sexual beings, but
Thank you.
the problem is that women are being sexualized way more than men.
And men are being utilized way more than women. If women are seen as objects of belonging, then men are seen as objects of utility. That's why women wear distinctive ball gowns and men all wear the same penguin suit. The ornaments look different from each other. That's the point. Knives and forks look the same. That's the point. Men and women both have problems. You just don't give a fuck about the men, just like you don't give a fuck about spoons. Hey, Lizzie, right? Say something just fucking mind-blowing, eh?
In pornography, women are sexualized. And
That's true, Lizzie. That's very true. Do you know why it's blowing everyone's minds?
I don't have a problem with sexualizing women.
Are you sure about that, Lizzie? Because you basically just told us you need feminism because pornography sexualizes women. I mean, is the problem that pornography sexualizes women more than men? Because in that case, it would be discrimination against men. See, we're back on the Corinthians test, Lizzie. You can look at pornography as proof of sexism because pornography sexualizes women. Think real hard for me, Lizzie. What does pornography do to men? It's pornography, remember. It's images of people having sex. What does that necessarily, by intrinsic definition, do to the men who appear in it? It sexualizes them, Lizzie. And I'm not even going to get into the porn industry gender pay gap, which really is nothing to do with agents. The point is, Lizzie, you might as well be saying, I need feminism because rain gets women wet. Do you see, Lizzie? That reasoning can only begin to make sense in your conscience if you have already emptied your conscience of any consideration for men as a category of human. This is why I find feminists to be an endless source of entertainment, because every time they They do nothing but reveal their bigotry. And they keep doing it because they think they're being compassionate. Their compassion has been replaced with bigotry. Putting women in the victim box and men in the asshole box, no matter how obviously that is not the case. That's why they can say the most ludicrously callous things. And they could do it with a stupid fucking grin on their face. Like they actually give a shit about anyone but themselves. It's the kind of evil from which I have trouble averting my eyes. You might say I have a problem, but maybe I call it a solution. Let's crack on, eh?
Number 3 is that we're taught that we need a man and that we need to find our value in a relationship with a guy.
What am I going to say, Lizzie? Is it at all possible that men are also taught to need women? Is it possible that feminists tell men that men can't talk about their feelings without help from feminism? When we've spent centuries doing a pretty good job of creating music and literature and cockney knees-ups without so much as a management consultant from feminism. I mean, no doubt by now, most of my responses will sound to you and to Jill like I'm just whining, what about the men's? Because you can both magically forget that I am responding to you saying, what about the women's? The point of both of your videos was to say, I need feminism because women have problems that men don't have. And then I come along and say, but men do have those problems. And you respond, shut up, you whiny piss baby, go get laid and cry somewhere else. Why can't men talk about their feelings? Because you are hideous fucking people. You're not bad people, but you're definitely hideous.
Sexual harassment and rape culture.
Same thing happens to men. You just don't give a shit. Neither does the media and neither does the law.
I am a college student and we were taught coming in as freshmen, we went through this like kind of class on how to not get raped.
Well, men are simply taught, don't rape, by the posters put up all over campus and the propaganda they're obliged to internalize. It doesn't occur to anyone that the vast majority of men are psychologically incapable of raping anyone. And that the 4% who are capable of do not give a shit what a poster tells them not to do. And all you're doing is making all men guilty by association, which only provides more cover for the rapists. The actual rapists, who tend to be repeat offenders because they're very good at manipulating people. And it's easy for a wolf in sheep's clothing to hide among a flock of sheep who are constantly being randomly accused of being wolves. If witches were real, then the Salem witch trials would have only made it easier to be a witch. Well, rapists are real. And this witch hunt of yours is making it easier to be a rapist. And continually more and more difficult to be an ordinary male. In the meantime, as you say, Lizzie, women are simply being told how not to get raped. No one is telling women not to rape men. Everyone's just telling women to hate men. That men are cruel and barbarous and all-powerful. And that they're unstoppable rape machines that could go off at any minute. Even the frail, geeky-looking ones, especially the frail, geeky-looking ones. They're the most dangerous somehow. Now go forth. Even if you fuck them against their will, everyone will laugh at them and brush it off and normalize it. Even when women rape underage boys, it is laughed off and normalized. But if a man is even falsely accused of rape, then before any trial or hearing has ever taken place, his face is plastered everywhere as a rapist and his reputation is tattered forever. This is exactly what feminists describe as rape culture. But like with every endeavour they have undergone, they have the whole thing backwards. They need the world to look like it's backwards, because they make their living and feed their ego by complaining that the world is backwards. It's all they've ever done. And they've rolled it over, generation after generation, pathologically ignoring men's issues so they can pathologically inflate women's issues and make a pretty penny from the scaremongering. So for those of you who keep asking me, why do you keep talking about feminism? Or why don't you go back to talking about religion or the right wing or whatever? Just look, when any line of dogma connected to religion or the so-called right wing is being taught as a mandatory curriculum in every university across the Western world, then maybe I'll give them equal airtime. These are not churches. These are not lobbies. They are state-funded learning institutions. People pay thousands for an education. And that education is then held to ransom by the kind of puritanical hysteria that even the most sanguinary cardinals of the Spanish Inquisition would find frankly impractical.
Verbal yes means yes regarding sex.
Are you listening? Here's the evidence. A modern day college student is appearing before you and telling you that consensual sex did not exist until the invention of the word yes. For the millions of years of our evolutionary struggle before that as a social species, every sexual encounter was rape. But they're both smiling and embracing and accumulating fluid in the pubic region. And they've been close companions for years, and they've done this hundreds of times before. No, all they can do is grunt. Oh, well, okay, you all belong in prison. All prehistoric ancestors of humans, and any two people who don't speak the same complex verbal language. You all belong in prison. Except it's not all of our ancestors, is it? It's only half of them. It's not any two people. It's just the man. No man is ever going to go to the police or indeed the university authorities and say, we had sex 2 years ago and he put a finger in my ass, therefore I was raped. Because they know they're not going to be taken seriously by anyone. But girls are being encouraged to do that because they know they will. Girls are being told that if he touches any part of your body without asking, that's rape. Universities are being obliged by the Dear Colleague letter to investigate every time a woman makes such an accusation, no matter how frivolous. See, you can completely ignore the empirical truth that this rape hysteria of yours is only ever going to reflect reality by virtue of being a self-fulfilling prophecy. Ordinary men won't seek sex anymore. They'll be legitimately terrified of the legal risks. And ordinary women won't seek sex. They'll be illegitimately terrified of men. So the only people left having sex or seeking sex are the rapists. The male ones and the female ones. The male rapists will abuse multiple women and they'll get away with it because their victims will all think, oh well, he made a mistake. All men do it, according to the posters. And the female rapists will abuse men and then they'll get away with it by accusing their victims of rape. And the university will listen and believe and blame the victim. See that? The Bible intrinsically contradicts itself as well. All you are doing is making life unbelievably, catastrophically, absurdly difficult for men, while erroneously telling women that their lives are absurdly difficult. You are not helping anyone. All you are doing is fucking it up for men even more than you are fucking it up for women. And that is all you need. That is your goal met. As long as it looks from a relative standpoint like men are sinking in relation to women, then the enclave of feminist demagogues get to keep their job for another fucking moon cycle.
Domestic violence that women experience.
Same thing happens to men. But no one gives a shit, so nothing gets done about it. It's, you know, it's pretty much universally considered okay to beat boys, but not okay to beat girls. And then we blame boys for being violent. I mean, even when women domestically abuse men and boys and are found guilty of it, those women are applauded by the masses and twisted into a victim narrative by the family courts. And again, if a man is so much as falsely accused of domestic violence, he loses his family, his house, and probably his job before a trial has even taken place. You are not just ignoring men's issues in situations where men's and women's issues are equal. You are ignoring men's issues even when they are objectively, legally more urgent than women's issues. I'm getting quite frustrated with you now, Lizzie. You're trying to give examples of how it's legally, objectively worse for women, and you keep coming up with examples of how it's legally, objectively worse for men. And you're just magically pretending that women are still the victims.
130 million women in the world have been forced to go through genital cutting, which occurs mainly in Islamic countries.
Excuse me, Lizzie. If I could. This is where I would go, bagay. $130 million women, you say? In the poorest, most uncontrollable and religiously turbulent region on the planet, you say? I don't want you to see my face anymore, Lizzie. Let's look at the map. Now, Lizzie, remember, this is you telling me why we need feminism and why we need to focus on women's rights instead of men's, okay? Can you imagine for me what that map would look like for male genital cutting? Correct me if I'm wrong, but your own country of residence, Lizzie, would be a sort of yellowy orange, yes? In this particular scheme. Perhaps somewhere between Chad and Liberia? Yes? That's right, Lizzie. If you rendered this map for male genital cutting, it would not stop at the boundaries of the poorest region on the planet. You would have to zoom it out to the entire planet and the 1 billion men who have experienced this particular barbarity. And it would still very much include those exceptionally poor regions. And with similar ratios. But, Lizzie, it would also include a number of very rich, very powerful, very stable countries professing to be secular and enlightened civilizations who have no excuse whatsoever for treating 8-day-old infants like a fucking pork roast. To summarize, Lizzie, you are telling us that there are 130 million women, mostly in Africa, many of them in lawless deserts and religiously superstitious families, women whose human right to bodily and sexual autonomy has been denied, usually along with their male counterparts. And that's why we need feminism. And I'm telling you, Lizzie, that we need men's rights because there are 1 billion men all over the world, including most of the men in your own country, whose human right to bodily and sexual autonomy has been denied, where the equivalent action on females is expressly and strictly forbidden for obvious medical reasons that also apply just as obviously to the male operation. The pseudoscience you conjure in order to rationalize male genital mutilation is exactly the same as the pseudoscience they conjure in Africa to rationalize the female kind and the male kind. Here's an idea. If the poorest countries in the world somehow see it as culturally acceptable to mutilate the genitals of children, how about one of us rich countries somewhere takes the lead and actually stops mutilating the genitals of children as though it's perfectly culturally acceptable? I mean, if you actually stop, do away with this fucked up game where you magically pretend bad things never happen to males and actually wake the fuck up and stop being barbaric fucking baby mutilating hypocrites before you tell other continents to stop doing what you're doing.
And this is something that was really shocking and sad to me, which doesn't just take place in China, but
yeah, there are more women than men. Not just in China, all over the world there are more women than men. It's because men get killed more. Oh, what's that? They mostly get killed by other men? Okay, internal dispute. Fuck it, not our problem.
But in China, there's 39,000 baby girls who weren't taken care of in their first year of life and died because of that.
Oh, they're mostly killed by their mothers. Internal dispute. Fuck it, not our problem.
You could go on and on and on to talk about like all the statistics of how women are seen as inferior to men.
All the while ignoring the statistics of how men are seen as inferior to women. Because to you, men's issues are not a priority whatsoever, even when they are blatantly, obviously, bigger than women's issues. You prioritize men below women or not at all every single time in every single instance. But that's totally not the very definition of seeing men as inferior.
Less valuable than men, and because of that, we're being abused, raped, killed, not taken care of, allowed to die. Luckily, in the part of the world that I live in, the United States, I feel like women are seen as more valuable.
It's funny how that works, isn't it? I mean, by your own reasoning there, if men are seen as less valuable than women in your own country, then men are the ones getting abused, raped, killed, not taken care of, and allowed to die. But fuck the problems in your own country. I mean, they're not problems, are they? They result in you as a woman being more valuable than a man. How the fuck is that a problem? Herpy. What we need is feminism, so that you men can just fly over to the Middle East and fire another round of shells into that misogynistic shit smear of a region where they treat men and women like vermin. Because they can't afford not to. And in the meantime, many of the men in that region are thinking of which misogynistic shitlords they're going to blow up next. To be honest, you're worse than Jill, Lizzie. Because you don't just come with a series of stupid fucking grins. You come with a sunny fucking force field of a face. While you demonstrate, issue by issue, that men and their needs are terminally invisible to you. And you even admit that you're more valuable than a man, but you just don't care. You'll still join a cult that blatantly values women over men. And you'll justify it all by othering people from far away and long ago. You are the oldest kind of feminist, Lizzie. You're a traditionalist. You never give a fuck, and you never have given a fuck about equality. You just like playing with other people like they are your fucking toy dolls. I'm beginning to see just where Serena's coming from. Hey, Serene, let's have you, eh?
We understand that people growing up in abusive households have higher chances of being impacted by abuse, right? They have higher chances of getting into abusive relationships, being abused, or being an abuser. We understand that soldiers coming back from, violent war zones, or people that are constantly in dangerous situations, like, firefighters and stuff like that, they have a higher chance of suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. They have a higher chance of not being able to adjust to civilian life. We know this. We understand this. We understand that people in certain environments will most likely be psychologically impacted in certain ways, right? Like, we can understand this. But when we start talking about white people, all of a sudden, everything we know about the human brain fucking flies out the window.
Yo, definitely my favorite now. You're very easy to clip because you say the same fucking thing over and over and over again. I just need to clip out the repeats and shelve them, and you're down to like a radio commercial's worth of really quite mind-numbingly unself-aware racism.
I'm someone who has extreme emotions, so I have these big feelings, and I've been called crazy and emotionally bipolar.
That's a very important point, actually.
And it's kind of this insult that men and other women pin on women, that if someone has emotions and feels things, that they're crazy.
Has it occurred to any of you, at any point, that I might be crazy? Is it because of the emotions I'm displaying? Or is it because of the crazy arguments I'm making about men somehow having it bad too? In either case, I have once again conclusively refuted your point there, have I not? Your point that only women experience this. So, Lizzie, given that you are in the business of pathologically ignoring men's needs and issues, would you care to give us a quick soliloquy?
Being friends with guys is that they feel all the same things that we feel as women. They just aren't allowed to express them because it's seen as a weakness. And the reason that it's seen as a weakness is because we view women who have these emotions as inferior. And if we didn't view women as inferior, we didn't view people who have more emotions and are more emotional as inferior, then that would also free men to be able to admit that they have emotions and to feel their emotions. Instead of just like viewing women as equal, if we view women and men as equal sexually, then guys won't have that on them anymore for like an expectation of who this is to be.
That clip gave me cancer.
I think that as a feminist, the best thing you can do is become educated on these topics.
This is a racist microaggression.
That you can talk to more people about them, because right now in the United States, we really need to be working on social equality.
And you feel like you have a right to come on my YouTube channel and come in my black space and try to correct me.
And using our words and our actions to treat men and women as equal and to accept each other for who we are, not for the stereotypes that we try to pin on each other.
All white people, all of you. If you ain't saying that, then you ain't saying nothing. Period.
Teaming up with those people instead of barging into an unrelated space and, telling them that they need to talk about you and only you now.
You have a superiority complex.
Is a fairly bad idea. And really inefficient as well.
But that's not the way that the brain works.
Of course, there's also a difference between barging your way into an unrelated group and making sure to take your turn in a group which encompasses more than just you.
And it's fucking absurd. It's fucking absurd to me. It's like, you are not an Omega level mutant able to control shit with your mind.
Feminism. It's simple, and yet so very complicated. Though we may have wandered off on a couple of occasions into a glossary of terms.
Feminism is about weakening humanity.
Literally every last one of you, right?
Bye!
I have all the cancer!